In this video, we'll talk about the subtype discriminator and why do we need a subtype discriminator. So consider the problem of inserting a new instance of a supertype. Now, when I insert an instance in my database, the question is into which of the subtypes, if any, should this instance be inserted? So will I insert it in subtype 1, subtype 2, just leave it at the supertype, insert it into more than one subtype? How will I know what should I do? So we need a simple mechanism to implement these rules. And this is what we call the subtype discriminator. So the subtype discriminator is an attribute of the supertype whose values will determine the target subtype or even possibly target subtypes in the case of an overlap. So for the disjoint, we'll have a simple attributes with alternative values that will indicate the possible subtypes that we may fall in. In the case of overlap, it's going to be a composite attribute whose subparts relate to different subtypes in our design. And each subpart contains a value indicating whether or not the instance belongs to a subtype. So let's look at this example. When we talk about employee, we said we had hourly employee, we had salaried employee, and we had the consultants. So since we have the constraints added here, total specialization and total and disjoint subtypes, each employee must either be hourly, salaried, or consultant. It cannot be just an employee, and it cannot be more than one of those subtypes. So we have added the employee type attribute in here to serve as our subtype discriminator. And how will we use this? So every time we insert a new employee record, what is going to happen is we will code this employee type attribute as follows. We'll have the letter H for hourly, the letter S for salaried, the letter C for consultant. And depending on this code, the instance is then going to be inserted into the appropriate subtype. And that is why we include those subtype discriminators here on those lines. That tells me if the type is H, then it's going to go to hourly employee. If the type is S, then it's going to go to salaries. If the type is C, then it's going to go to consultants. Now, what about the overlapping subtypes? So when the subtype overlap, a slightly modified approach might be applied or must be applied for the subtype discriminator. So a given instance of a supertype may require that we create an instance in more than one of those subtypes. Recall the part example when we said a part may be manufactured or maybe a purchased part. So a new attribute that's named part type will be added to part, and this is going to be a composite attribute with components manufactured or purchased, and we will code these by booleans. Now, why do I have to insert in both? The answer is if I'm like extracting a report and I'm looking at all manufactured parts. Since this part, as we said, I believe we said the example was part 4000, is in both categories. Then when I'm looking at manufactured parts, I should see it in there. If my report is looking at purchased part, it also should see it in there. And that is why I need to make sure that is going to be inserted into both categories. So let's look at how it's going to look. We will have something like this. So for parts that are manufactured only, we will fill in the attribute with Y for manufactured, which is a yes, and N for purchased, which is a no. For purchased only, it is going to be the opposite, N for manufactured and Y for purchased. And for parts that are purchased and manufactured, it is going to be filled with y's for both, and our ERD is going to look like this. So the values of the discriminator attribute will determine where the instance is going to be stored. And recall in the previous one we just had letters, but now we said if the manufacturer is equal to yes, then it's going to be here. If purchase is equal to yes, it's going to be here. And obviously if both of them are yeses, it's going to go to both parts or to both subtypes.